Earlier this year, I hosted a session featuring CMSs and frameworks to talk about images and developer experience. The one common thread that emerged each and every time was this module called SHARP. So I pinged its author, Mr. Lovell Fuller, for insights and to see if he'd join us. And he did. So here to talk about how SHARP was informed by an 18th century painter to become a powerful image processing tool is Mr. Lovell Fuller. Enjoy.
Anyway, so yeah, my name's Lovell Fuller, live in London, freelance software developer. I work on something called SHARP. Now, some people on this call will probably have heard of SHARP. Some people won't have heard of SHARP. It doesn't matter whether you have or not. You've probably used it, or at least you've viewed an image that it's created at some point, because it does power quite a lot of frameworks and CMSs now. But I want to go back, actually, I know it's the Web Performance Group. I want to go back pre-web. Actually, I'm going to go back even older than that. I'm going to go back maybe 200 years. So this is a self-portrait, or possibly a selfie portrait, by Elizabeth Lebrun. So she was a Rococo artist, very famous in France 200 years ago. She did oil paintings of lots of very famous people, Marie Antoinette, that kind of thing. And little did she know when she was painting the oil painting just how, in her own small way, influential she would be in the creation of SHARP. And the reason for that is because her artwork hangs here. Now, this is the National Gallery. It's in Trafalgar Square in London. If you haven't visited and you're in London, please do go along. It's quite amazing. There are thousands of fabulous paintings from sort of Renaissance, Romantic, Rococo, all the eras. So many good pieces of artwork. Now, the National Gallery, again, we're going to come forward a little bit here. So we're going to 30 years ago, so still pre-web, 1989, 1990. The web hasn't been invented yet. It won't be invented for another year. In 1989, 1990, the National Gallery realized they probably ought to kind of look after some of their paintings and see if some of the paintings might be deteriorating slightly. They needed some sort of software to be able, and hardware to be able to look at this and work out how the paintings were keeping up. Paint starts to flake off, that kind of thing. Here's another painting. This is The Haywain by John Constable, another painting that you can find in the National Gallery. Again, one of the many, many thousands of paintings that they need to conserve. So it was about 30 years ago that this machine was built, and it was built by Kirk Martinez and John Cupit. I think John might actually be on the call today. It's a camera scanner for scanning the old masters and all the paintings that they have at the National Gallery. So if you look at the back of the picture, you can just about make out an oil painting on the canvas at the back. In front of that, there's some lights. There's a red and a blue light. Then there's a camera mounted on a sort of 3D assembly so it can scan the whole image. Now, this was capable of generating images that were about 10,000 by 10,000 pixels, which 30 years ago was massive. No software could handle images that big. So they had to develop some custom software. And that is what we now know as libvips. In this particular example, it's able to capture 7 channels of information. So you've got red, green, blue. I think it's ultraviolet, and then 3 infrared channels. So 7 channels, multispectral images. So these images were absolutely massive, and existing software just couldn't handle it. So it required custom software. And this system was not only used in the National Gallery, it went on to be used in the Uffizi. This is a Botticelli painting. It was also used in the Louvre. It still is, I believe, used in the Louvre. This is another famous painting. You might have seen this one before. It's also used in the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. Another famous painting here, Rembrandt, Night Watch. Now, this has recently been digitally restored. So there are some bits of this painting where the paint's flaking off, and they didn't know what the paint looked like originally. So they used libvips to scan the whole image, and then they pumped those tiles of sections of images through machine learning to look at the style of oil painting, and then predict how the sections of paint that were missing might originally have looked. And you can go online. I can share some links afterwards, and you can view a deep zoom image of the Night Watchman in its digitally restored form. So libvips, why is libvips so fast? Well, I'm going to be very, very brief here. The threading model is tied to the I/O. In the middle, you can see three operations taking place on an image. On the left, you've got the data source, which is the input. On the right, you've got the data sink, which is the output. And in this example, you've got three operations that need to take place on the image between the input and the output. Now, the threading occurs horizontally. So the first thread is responsible for running operations 1, 2, and 3, but so is the second thread. And the reason for this is that each thread is given a region of the image to work on. And so that allows them to work independent of each other, but also it allows, because those regions are so small, they can fit into the L2 cache of the CPU, which means there's a lot less memory transfer going on between the CPU cache and the main memory, which is like almost an order of magnitude faster. It also allows for lock-free operation as far as possible. You potentially have one thread on the read side and another thread on the write side as well. Because you're reading small regions out, those regions can finish very quickly, which means you can start to write the image whilst you're still reading the image. So you can encode the image whilst you're still decoding it. And that's, it sounds like a simple idea, but it was revolutionary, and certainly I think still is. I mean, it's totally different to the way, for example, ImageMagick works, which loads an image, runs operation 1, then runs operation 2, then runs operation 3, then finally saves it. So anyway, there's loads of information about how LibViz works on the LibViz wiki. Go check it out if you want to know more. I cannot do it justice on this call. So fast forward to approximately 2011. So I'm working for a company called Net-a-Porter in West London. It's based in Westfield Shopping Centre in West London near Shepherd's Bush. And it was this kind of unique collision of content, of technology, of fashion, and more importantly of commerce. And it kind of collided all four of those things together. So lots of technologists, lots of fashion industry people, people from publishing backgrounds, all trying to sell luxury fashion goods on the web. And they were very tightly controlling of the environment. So we had our own photo studio in the office. We had our own photo retouching studio. And the images that we took for the website, they were shot in the office. They were retouched in the office. I think when the research studio had finished, there was a bunch of TIFF files on a shared drive somewhere. A cron job would pick them up. A shell script would run. It would run ImageMagick over those TIFF files. It would generate maybe 3 different various dimensioned image per TIFF, and then they'd get copied onto a web server and they'd be out there for the public to see. Now, 2013 was kind of the time when responsive web design was like a big thing, and all of our product images were only in 3 different dimensions. And we're like, well, we want to do responsive web design, but we can't. And the people creating the mobile apps were like, well, we want images in other dimensions. Right? Well, we can't do it because we've got thousands of images that are already in these 3 fixed sizes. We can't do it. I'm sorry, we can't solve that. So I had this kind of like idea. I was like, well, maybe, just maybe, we could generate these images on the fly. So I went home on the 19th and 20th of August 2013, just in the evening at home. I kind of knocked up some quick code. I'd already kind of heard of LibViz, but I hadn't really used it before. I've been using Node.js for a couple of years at this point. And I kind of tried to throw it all together into this kind of very small native module that just did JPEG resizing, just to see how fast it might be. And this got released to NPM as Sharp version 0.0.1. That was the start. How did it grow? So, moving on, 2014. Now, this is just around the corner from the Net-a-Porter office. There's the A40. This is the Westway, and there's a really colourful installation under there. Now, colourful, that's a great word. When I spell the word colourful, it's got a U in it. When Canadians spell the word colourful, it also has a U in it. When our friends in the US of A spell colourful, it doesn't have a U in it. And if, like me, you've been developing the web for many, many years, you kind of get used to the idea that color doesn't have a U in it when you do encoding. But I thought, well, it's an image processing library. It'd be quite nice if it actually had British English as well. So the whole API of Sharp supports British English and US English. So here's an example to color space. You can use it with or without the U. Other examples are normalize, grayscale. There are probably a few other ones as well. So you can spell things how you like when you use it, which I think makes it slightly refreshing in terms of an API. And I get quite a lot of comments about that on Twitter. People, when they see that, they go, oh, that's a bit different. I like that. 2014 was also when it first hit the trending repos on GitHub. And this screenshot's number 6. I think a couple of days after this, did finally get to number 1, and it's kind of drifted back up to trending occasionally ever since. But I think this is when people really started to take notice of it and start to actually use it. Moving on. So, the British £2 coin. Has anyone ever seen one of these? There's something a bit unusual about the £2 coin, and it has words written around the edge of it. I've got one here, but you probably can't see it. So here's one I prepared earlier. So yeah, up until a couple of years ago, the wording around the edge of a £2 coin said, "Standing on the shoulders of giants." It's a quote attributed to Sir Isaac Newton, but I think probably people said it before him. And the reason I've mentioned this is because Sharp is very much standing on the shoulders of giants. There are 28 different C, C++, and Rust libraries. When you type in npm install Sharp, this is what you're getting. Yeah, I mean, there are people on this call who've contributed to many of these libraries, I know. So well, thank you for doing that. It would not exist without all of these libraries. But 28 libraries, that's quite a big attack surface. Luckily, libvips is part of the OSS fuzz program. This is where it's continuously fuzz tested. So random images are pumped through it. The idea being that we're trying to break the code, try and find things like memory leaks or use of uninitialized memory. It has found a couple of things with libvips. It's been running in OSS fuzz for about 3 or 4 years now. Yeah, a couple of small things have been found. It's actually found bugs in dependencies of libvips. So libhyph, for example, found a couple of security problems in that. More recently, we've included libjxl. I know John was talking about it earlier, and we found a few sort of images which I guess I'd describe as memory bombs. So they're very, very small images, but when you decode them, they can take gigs and gigs of memory. But yeah, the libjxl team have been really responsive when we've posted example images that the fuzz testers have found. So hopefully we can improve libjxl as well as libvips by doing this. As well as OSS fuzz, we've also had third-party security people look at libvips. There was a problem found about 3 years ago where it was possible to craft a PNG image that would leak memory. What we're looking at here is an image where previously some good images have been processed, and then they processed a bad image, and the output of the bad image was actually part of the good image. So we were leaking other bits of memory, which could have been very, very dangerous. Luckily, it was a very, very quick fix. We fixed it within a day, probably within hours of it being reported. That also led me to change Sharp to be a lot more secure by default. So if any image is slightly corrupt, it now won't load it by default. So the idea is that people can use Sharp with untrusted input. So moving on, 2017, I added a feature which made its way into libvips to do with smart crop. So for example, this is where you might want to convert a portrait image into a landscape image. And to do that, you need to work out what is the most salient part of the image, where's the interesting part of the image. I guess the code I came up with used 3 different techniques. The first one was edge detection, standard convolution kernel. The second one was saturation, so areas of high saturation are another good place to look, so that things that are interesting have saturated color. And the third one was around skin tone. Now this can be a little bit controversial. Luckily, there was a Brazilian photographer, her name is Angelica Das, and she had created this photography project called Humanade. And she takes pictures of people from all around the world, all walks of life, all races, and mounts them as portraits, but using the Pantone color of their skin as the background of the image. Now, she's made these available on the internet. Here's a close-up here. And so I used all of these Pantone colors, specifically the chroma from the Pantone colors, to work out a range of colors that should be construed as skin color. So hopefully less controversial than some of the other approaches which have been taken around using skin tones. I know Twitter's got into trouble with this recently. Sharp libvips hopefully don't fall into that trap. So that's kind of how it grew over the years. Let's kind of bring things up to kind of slightly more up to date. So maybe only 3 years ago here. So Gatsby, some of you will have heard of Gatsby and used Gatsby. So this is what I describe as the Jamstack protagonist. It was kind of the first of the main static site builders. And from the very start, they used Sharp for all of the image processing in Gatsby, and to this day still use Sharp years later. They've been really good to the project. They've donated money to the Open Collective, which I'll come on to in a minute, about sort of $4,500 US. But also they've provided feedback to Sharp. They've helped improve Sharp. It's led me to help improve Gatsby. It's been a really good relationship, and I'm really pleased that they use Sharp, because everyone has benefited from Gatsby's use of Sharp. Okay, 2019. Right, this is the year that we reached 19 million NPM downloads. So in 2018, it's about 5 million. 19 million, I think, in 2019. Last year was about 45 million. This year so far is 56 million. So what we're seeing is about 2 downloads per second. So since I started talking, it's been downloaded about 2,000 times, which is a little bit insane. 2020, this is probably the year of the sort of new formats. Sharp was already dealing with GIFs, JPEGs, PNGs, etc. But it was AVIF and Hike really kind of came into their own in this year. Now, Hike is absolute patent minefield. So I'm not including that in the pre-built binaries for Sharp at all, ever, until it comes out of patent. However, AVIF is okay. There's lots of patent disclaimers. It's generally a relatively safe format. So the pre-built binaries do support that, although it is quite slow to encode. There's been some updates within the last 3 months, which mean that it is twice as fast as it used to be, but still a little bit slow. So hoping JPEG XL can solve that problem. So back up to this year. So Henri alluded to the fact that lots of frameworks use Sharp. Here are some of them. We talked about Gatsby already. Next.js originally had it as an optional dependency, then made it a dependency, then removed it entirely. Now it's back as an optional dependency. So if you have a Next.js site, I strongly recommend you add Sharp as a dependency to your project, because it will allow Next to switch its logic internally to use Sharp instead of using slower alternatives. If you use Vue, then Nuxt and Gridsome, both static generators, they have Sharp under the hood. 11t uses Sharp. Svelte now has a plugin for Sharp. The new version of Parcel Bundler, version 2, is also going to include Sharp for image optimization. And there are many, many more. Amazon AWS, they are using Sharp in their serverless image handler. Up until about 2 years ago, they were using the Python library Thummer, and they made a switch to using Sharp. And by all accounts, I believe a lot of people use this now. I do get occasionally issues open on GitHub about this, so it's good to see the people using it, and it's great. So this is using Sharp in Lambda, their function as a service platform, and yeah, seems to work well. This is brilliant. So I heard a rumor recently. I have no idea if this is true, but it's a great story. So when you sign up to the Harry Potter fan club, if you pay enough money, the gold tier, I believe it is, they give you a personalized journal, which has lots of information, has lots of personalized pictures and text in it. And I believe, I haven't had this confirmed yet, but I believe it's all powered by Sharp and libvips. So if you join the fan club, you get a Sharp powered book. Isn't that image magic? So all about the future. Where's Sharp going? So one of many people's first experience of Sharp is if they try to install it and it goes wrong, and they get a screen full of errors, and it's terrible. And loads of issues get opened on the Sharp repo all the time about this, and it's fair enough actually, because it isn't easy to install native modules. There's a request for comments, RFC, for the Yarn package manager to introduce the concept called package variants. Now, I'm fully supportive of this. I've been involved. I've been commenting on this. It's led to NPM also adding something similar as well. So I'm really hoping there's some movement on this next year, and that should reduce loads of the installation problems that people have, because it builds the concept of installing native dependencies into the package manager. I believe ESBuild is another example of a package which is really going to benefit from this. WebAssembly, loads of people ask me, oh, but I want to use Sharp in a browser. Oh, but I want to use Sharp in such and such platforms. Like, well, everyone says, yeah, use WebAssembly. So a couple of years ago, we paid an intern to do some work to make libvips work with WebAssembly. His name's Kleis, based in the Netherlands. He did an amazing job, and he's basically, it's all very experimental still, but he has just about managed to get libvips and some of its dependencies running as WebAssembly, so cross-compiling down to WebAssembly. It's not going to be as fast as native, It might be missing a few features. There are definitely some security features of WASM that actually slow things down a little bit around shared array buffers. But something I'd like to look at next year is about maybe seeing if we could replicate some of the SHARP API using WASM. So that's quite exciting. Lots of people ask about Dino. This is a kind of a new runtime from the guy who created Node, but it's written in Rust. So just last week, Dino added support for FFI. So you can write plugins using foreign function interface. So that's a possible way that we can get SHARP and libvips into Dino as well. Again, early days, don't know if it's possible, but it's something I'd like to look at in the next year. We've already heard about JPEG XL today. I'd love to integrate with libjxl. libvips already does. I think at the moment it's a little bit experimental. I'm not sure I'd use it with untrusted data right now, untrusted input rather right now, but there's so much development activity on the libjxl repo, which is great news. So as soon as things slow down, as soon as things stabilize there a little bit, then I'll definitely be adding libjxl to the pre-built binaries for SHARP and allow other people to, or a lot more people to generate whichever JPEG XL images. Going back a little bit in time, those who remember GeoCities will recall the animated GIFs of the 1990s. And I've always kind of slightly resisted having GIF writing in SHARP because it's such an old format and it's really, I don't know, it's not very economical. But Shopify have stepped forward and paid for GIF writing to be improved in libvips over the last few months. I've been working on that. So once that stabilizes, I intend to also expose that in SHARP as well. So hopefully we should have much faster JPEG writing. And so we can all pretend it's the 1990s again. libvips has an open collective. We use this to collect donations from organizations and individuals. I mentioned Shopify being really generous recently. I know there's some people from Shopify on the call, so thank you very much. You guys have given us $10,000 this year. Also mentioned Gatsby, another big donator there. The AMP project, Google gave us a couple of grand last year. There's also quite a few individual donators as well. I mean, every penny counts because we use the money that's donated to Open Collective to help people at the start of their career. So we take on interns. So typically they're people who are fresh out of school or college or currently studying, or people who are maybe finding it difficult to get their way into the tech industry and looking for a little bit of work experience. So this is all paid work experience. So Kleiss, I mentioned a couple of years ago, we paid him about €2,500, I think it was, to work on WebAssembly for libvips. We've got a new guy starting very soon in India. His name's Harsh. He lives in Chennai in India. He's going to be working on improving the documentation for libvips. But yeah, the idea is that we'll probably try and take on at least one intern a year just to make libvips better. So all the money you donate to the libvips Open Collective will be spent paying interns and people to get work experience, just to improve libvips and the ecosystem. I'd like to say thank you, not only to you for listening, but also people who've contributed bug reports to SHARP, people who've fixed bugs, added features, even simple things like just improving documentation. All those things are really well appreciated. We've got about 150 contributors now to SHARP, which is great. So yes, so thank you everybody who's helped in any way, shape or form. And also thank you for listening. If you want to find me on the internet, I'm at Lovell in all the usual places, on Twitter and GitHub. I'm going to hang around for sort of 10 minutes or so if anyone wants to ask questions in the chat here as well.